This is going to be a video explaining how to do assignment 2 and what the fuck is going on with assignment 2 as we go through it. So, assignment 2 comes with a zip file. If we do extract all with a right click, the reason why I'm extracting it is because even if I can see the files, otherwise I need to actually be able to access them, and they need to be able to be read, and they will not be read while they're still in the zip. So this is the zip, this is the open one. The open one is what we want. There's a README file, 3 Python files in here. I'm going to go to PyCharm. I'm going to open it. I will update PHPStorm when I'm done this class. I'm done recording this, I mean. And you see, I already have this open, but let's just say I didn't. I'm going to close project. And I'm going to delete this because this wasn't here. And we're going to move this from here. Okay. So you'll get something like this. What you're going to do is you're going to open PyCharm. You're going to click new project. You're going to make a pure Python project. You're going to browse, and you're going to copy this file location, and you're going to paste it in here. I'm going this a little quickly because you guys will be able to pause this video and slow it down, rewatch it as much as possible, as much as needed. So I'm going to push OK. I'm going to push create. It's going to say I already have an existing. I'm going to say create from existing sources. What that does is it creates what it needs to create, meaning it creates the Python interpreter and other things that I want it to create, this venv file, this virtual environment, but it uses those files as the frame of reference. So I'm going to click the README and we will see what it says. What does the README say? The README says you need to instructions. Create your own shape, abstract. Create your own shape that uses the abstract shape class. We will find out what that means in a second. It should use exactly the same methods as square, but they should be implemented appropriately. For example, if you did a circle, then you need the getArea method to be 3.14 times radius squared. In the main method, use your class to create 3 objects. That's a typo. 3 objects, the same way the squares are created. Instruction and then submission instructions are literally just create a zip file containing this README and the Python files written by me and you, which means all of these files and the one that you create are going to be there, and then upload that zip file. We will go through all of that process. So first we're going to just open the main file and see what it does. What does it do? Because this is what we have to do. We have to be able to copy what it does here. I've got this square, and so it creates 1 square, it creates 2 squares, it adds those 2 together, and it prints out all 3. And if I run this code, if I click run, it actually runs that code and it prints out square 1, square 2, square 3, which is amazing, right? That's very cool that it can do that. Now, the problem or the question becomes, how do we actually do this for us? How do we make sure, how do we make it so that the plus works and that it converts to string and actually prints out some information that we would find meaningful, right? So let's open the square and see what it does. Well, square does this weird thing, right? It imports shape and it uses shape. It passes shape as an argument into the class. That's weird. We'll figure out what that does in a minute. In the meantime, though, we've got 6 methods here. We've got the init method, which we've seen on classes before, which is when we create an instance of the class, when we create an object, right? When this line is called, what it's actually doing is it's calling this init method. So you'll notice it passes in 1 argument, and that argument is going to be size, and that gets saved as self.size of sides. I'm just going to call it sides. I'm just going to call it sides for now. But it's the size of the sides because a square will always have the same, because all sides of a square are the same size. That's the definition. So I only need to store 1 number. And that's what the init function does. Notice how everything uses self. Now self is the default keyword, but it's the first argument in a function attached to a class or a class method, and those class methods will always take in the first argument as self, which is the object itself. Python is the only thing that does this. It's a little bit weird, but you get used to it after a while. And then some of these have a second argument, such as size or other, and some of these do not. Some of these just take in self. So when something just takes in self, you actually are going to call it without any other arguments. You're just going to call the function. You never pass anything for self. Now, it just Python automatically passes it with a class. Now, what are we actually doing though? What we're doing is, what do the other methods do? We have this getArea method. This getArea method literally does self.size of sides squared, right? That's how you calculate the area of it calculates the area of a square. This str method gives me back a string. Notice how the str method and all these other methods also have a double underscore. What the double underscore means is that is a default Python thing that we are overriding. So for example, the str method is when we want to convert this object into a string, this is how we do it. So if I look at my main function, if I run my main function, you'll notice how these are coming out as the string over here, right? But if I comment out this str method, which means the str method, as far as the Python interpreter goes, doesn't exist anymore, and I push and I run the thing again, it prints out these strings as these weird little square.square object at 0 point whatever, at the memory address, which is useless information, and that's why we override it with the thing. But for you to understand what's actually happening is we are overriding a built-in Python method. The same thing for add. In the case of add, I'm overriding the add method. In the case of gt, which is greater than, I'm overriding the greater than method. And ge is greater than or equal to, I'm overriding the greater than or equal to. So you'll notice that the str method just takes in a self, right? Because when I'm converting something to a string, I just need the object that I'm converting. But add, greater than, and greater than or equal all take in an other as well. Why do they take in an other? Because I need to compare it to something, or I need to add it to something. So what I'm defining is, for example, the add method, what I say is we create a new square that adds the two sizes of sides together. I could have added the area together and made that area the new sides, but that's not what I decided to do. And so if you look back at the code over here, what happens? We have one square that's the size of 5. We have a second square that's the size that the sides are 10, and then 1 plus 2 is going to give me back sides of 15. So if I run the code, we get back 5, we get back 10, and then we get back this 15 one, which is the one that we're adding. Now, these are the, right, and then there's the greater than and greater than or equals, which we're not using here, but we can very quickly demonstrate. We say if S1 is greater than S2, print yay, print yay, else print boo. And I'm going to run this, and it prints boo. Why? Because S1 is smaller. If I flip this around, even though I don't have a less than method, because I have a greater than method, it's still going to work. Now, here's one thing to keep in mind. This only works because this method is here. So again, the same way when I commented out the str method, I was replaced with the default. When I comment out the greater than, I'm going to replace it with the default, except that's going to cause an error. Why? Because there's no default operation for how to compare two objects that I created, right? If I create a class, I have to define how that class gets compared to itself, if I need it to, right? And I can do anything with this. I can make it so that greater than actually calculates something or does some weird stuff like that, which is not something we would want to do, but it is something in theory we could do. So what you have to actually do is you have to create your own class that matches this class and that has these same methods, but it makes sense logically to your thing. Now the last thing we gotta understand is what the heck is this part, the square, and we're passing in shape, right? So let's open shape and see what that is. So if I open the shape file, you notice here we're importing from ABC, we're importing ABC, and we're importing abstract method. Abstract base, ABC stands for abstract base class. What is an abstract class? An abstract class is a general description that then gets implemented. It's an abstraction, right? It's an abstract. It means we're defining something and then we're going to implement it later. What does it mean to define something? What it means to define something is just that we say, okay, every single thing that is a shape is going to have a getArea function. That's what we're defining. If I wanted to take this a step further, what I would do is, or if I want another example, like if I have a video game, I might have a bunch of possible different kinds of enemies in my game, but I would always want the enemy to have like a move, have a health, and have a way to get hit and a way to attack. So I would define an abstract class called enemy, and they would have those basic methods of attack and fight and all those other things. attack and take a hit and give a hit and walk or whatever. And the logic of and then the logic would be to every different enemy, right? So let's say I have an enemy that's like a really fast one, but only ever goes in a straight line until it hits something and then it moves, right? So then I would say, then I define the move method for, so it would have a speed of, let's say, 50, and then the move is just go straight, and then when you turn, rotate, and then if you can't move forward anymore, then rotate, right? And that enemy would only, let's say, have 3 health. So I would define, get hit. If the health is less than 3, then you're dead. And so on and so forth. And you can do this for a bunch of different things, and it makes it very easy to quickly implement a lot of stuff and make sure that your code remains consistent. So in our case, what we're doing is we're implementing this idea of a shape. So we already defined a square, and now we're going to add a new one. We're going to add a triangle. So if I go over here, if I go new file, and I go triangle, whoops, this should not be a new file. This should actually be a new Python file, my mistake. And I'm just going to call it triangle and create that. So again, I have to import the shape. So I'm going to leave the square on the other side. And this way we'll be able to look at the square and we'll be able to make sure that we're doing everything correct. So my triangle goes from shape, import shape, and then we go class triangle shape. I'm organizing this by class. I'm organizing this by class. Like each class is in its own file. You don't necessarily always have to do that, but you have to have a logical way of doing things. This is an easy logical way of doing it, so we're going to stick with that for now. If you have another way that you prefer, that you can justify in some projects, do that. For this, I expect you to do it this way. So we've got my triangle. Now you'll notice that my triangle is giving me a little bit of an error here. It's giving me a warning. Must implement all abstract methods, which means that if I go back to shape, there's this abstract method called getArea. So if I'm going to say that triangle is a shape, I must have getArea by the end of this. So we are going to, first we're going to write our init function because we always want to start with the init. And for this, we're going to have an A, a B, and a C. Right, we're just going to have our 3 sides of a triangle, and that's all we're going to take in. We're going to use those to calculate everything. So if I do self.a equals A, self.b equals B, and self.c equals C, right? And so now I've defined so that my class is always going to have the 3 sides that three sides. Now we have to do a def get area, right? Which is a function that I must have in this, the shape. Because it's a shape, I must have a get area function, and it's going to return. This is where we're going to define how it calculates the thing. So how do I calculate? For now, I'm just going to do none so that it exists, but we're going to have to define how to do it. So how do I calculate the shape, the area of a shape? We use a really simple formula. This is the formula. We do, first thing we do is we do S equals, what is it? S equals self.a plus self.b plus self.c, and that's divided by 2, and then we just return the square root now I'm forgetting how to do square root. 1 second. Square root in Python. The square root in Python is just, yeah, it is sqrt, right? It's import math, sorry. So in order to do the square root, we're going to need to do from math import sqrt, which is how we get the square root. And now we're just going to do the square root of, and this is just, I looked up the formula. There's like, have a web page open here with the formula. It doesn't matter what shape you do. I don't care how you do it. I'm not testing you on the math of this. I'm testing you on the ability to write the code that does what the thing does. And then this is going to be S times S minus self dot A times S minus self dot B times S minus self dot C. That's it. All right. And then you've just got these three, and that is going, and so that's going to calculate the area of my square, of my triangle, right? Given the three sides, and now we just got to calculate the rest of. Sorry, now we've got to just write the rest of the functions. So what are the rest of the functions? I've got my 4 functions here, which I'm just going to copy paste over, and then I'm going to define them for such a way, and then I'm going to define them. So triangle of, and then we just do self dot A x self dot B and then x self dot C is, and then we just do again self dot get area. And notice here when I'm calling self dot get area, I don't actually put any arguments there, right? Even though it passes in self, because self is just passed by default. So how are we going to do, so that's the get area, and that should give us a string. How are we going to define the add function? Notice how, because square is not imported into this file, square is a problem, which is good for us because we don't want it to match. So instead of square, obviously we're going to, if I add 2 triangles together, I expect, actually, we are going to say that 2 triangles together makes a square. Here's how we're going to do it. No, we should stick it to triangle makes a triangle, square makes a square, and that's going to be self dot A plus other dot A comma self dot B plus other dot B and then self dot C plus other dot C. Right? We've got these 3 things, and that is how we add them together. We don't actually have to change our greater than or greater than equal to because we've already got them there. So now I've gone ahead and I've created a triangle. I've created a triangle class. Now let's test it. So we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do the same thing for a triangle. So we do t1 equals. Oh, you have to import our triangle. So from triangle import triangle, and then we do equals a triangle of size 1, 3, 5. We're going to do that, and then we'll do t2 is going to equal triangle of 2, 4, 6. And then we are going to do t3 equals t1 plus t2, and then we are going to just exactly what we have here. So I'm just going to copy paste this print statement, except I'm going to replace the s's with t's. So t1, t2, and t3. And then I'm just going to go over there, and I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to run the main file over here, and I'm getting an error. What's the error? Math domain error. Huh. My mistake. What is the method? We're getting a little bit of an error. So whenever we get an error, first of all, we look at where the error is coming from, right? So it's being called because main is being called, and then inside main, when we're trying to, line 14, when we try to print these out, we're doing the self, right, which is calling the get area, And the getArea function is actually what's causing the error. So what's the error? Math domain error. So we're going to look up what the math domain error means. And you're using a value that falls outside the accepted domain of the function. So let's try to do this then. We'll do a squared equals this, and we will convert this to a integer, right? Because there's a chance that this is not an integer, so we'll just convert this to an int, and then once this is converted into an int, we'll pass a squared into square root. If we run this again, nope. So it's still my square root is being a problem, and Python math domain error if we try doing a square root. Something is wrong with what I'm doing here. Alright, how do we debug? The way we always debug. And we're going to go through, I'm going to keep this video running, and we're going to go through the debug exercise because it's not completed until we do this correct. And the exercise of debugging is an important one. So let's just take a look at what this is. So I'm going to run in debugger, and I see my value of self. I'm going to step forward to the next line, right? So I step over this. Now the value of s is 4.5, so that is potentially a problem. Now the value of a squared is negative 11. This means that I've implemented this method wrong, right? Because this should not be negative, this should be a positive number. And we can't take a square root of a negative, which is why we're getting that error. So if we stop this, we're going to go back to my formula and look it up. A plus B plus C over 2. This is getting into like mathematical stuff. So how do we avoid this? Let's do the thing that y'all would want me to do at this several points ago, which is ChatGPT. I'm going to quickly log into ChatGPT and I will ask it. I know you can't see what I'm doing on the other screen, that's why I'm talking about it as soon as I log in, so I'm not using, so you don't see my passwords. Here we go. All right. Whoop, whoop. How to calculate area of triangle from 3 sides in Python. They're using to the power of 0.5. Alright, let's do that. So instead of doing square root, we'll remove square root and see if this works. There's a good chance it will not, but we'll find out in a second. A squared power of 0.5. And if we push play, that works. Kinda. We're gonna get rid of this int call over here, and we are going to run that again, and we'll just round this, right? Round. And now if we run this, oh god, never mind. This is becoming a giant mess, so we will leave it. It's because it's doing complex numbers for like, it's being ridiculous. And I'm probably making a very obvious mistake, but for whatever the case is, I'll just go back to that ChatGPT thing really quick, right? Area triangle, which is just a plus b plus c divided by 2, and then s times, yeah. This is exactly the same formula we have going on here. I'll just take a look at this. Right here. Sorry, this is off topic. The point is, that's just, right, and then s is going to be s. That's my mistake. Is that my mistake? No, that's not I'm doing all this correct, right? S minus A, S times S minus B times S minus C. S times, and then all of that to the power of, what happens if we plug this into just a triangle calculator? What's the area of a triangle with sides 1, 3, 4? They don't do a valid triangle. Sum of two lengths must be the sum of the third length. That's why we're getting an error. I was doing something impossible. I was expecting a valid result. That is the issue. So if instead of doing this, we do this, we keep to the rule, which is 1 plus 2, right, would make 3, and then 2 plus 4 makes 6, so now we have two valid triangles, and if we rerun it, yeah, now plus 2, 1 by 2 by 3, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 1 squared plus 2 squared does not equal 3 squared. Oh god. Triangles are really confusing to me right now, and this is very opposite of my method. Sorry. That is all beside the point. The important point is how this works. Formulas are wrong. I don't really care too much about that for now, and for you guys, I'm not going to judge it too much. We should really, the way we do this is we would validate the triangle, right? We would say we'd only given a and b, and this is actually how we're going to fix it. We're going to set, and then self.c equals a squared, b squared plus a squared, right? So now we know that, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root, which now I'm calculating by the weird way of doing this, but whatever, it is still the same thing. Okay, so now if I do this and we replace, we do that, and we run our code again. Oh. Oops, and because I'm doing that, we should be doing that as well. And we pass that. Done. Right, and that actually gives us real areas with weird numbers over here, but what do you expect? Such is life. Anyway, not important. The important thing is that now my thing works, which is what does matter. And I only have to make one small change and get confused by math for a good 15 minutes there. Sorry about that. The important point is this is a triangle class. Now, about this class, and you don't have to do a triangle, you can do a circle, and you wouldn't have to deal with any of these weird things that I've had to deal with because I decided to do a triangle. Right, you can just do the radius of a circle, you take in one number, and you just calculate the radius. What's important for this, though, is we have an abstract method, and we have a bunch of methods that we're overriding. What does it mean to override? It means that there's a default thing that happens, and we are saying, no, Python, instead of doing the default behavior, I want you to do this, or you don't have a default behavior, I'm telling you to do this instead. So the plus is going to be the plus, or the greater than, and less the greater than or equals, and so on and so forth. Now that I've completed the project, how do I submit it? What I do is I would open the README file, make sure I had my name and ID, and then in the file that I'm in, right, in the folder where I've actually made the changes, I know I've made the changes because I have my new file, I take all of this and I right click and I go compress. This is how you make a zip file. I do not want to see, if you're using an older version of Windows, then it's going to look like this, right? You're going to see show more options. You might not see the compress right there, but you'll see send to, and you'll see compressed zipped folder. I do not want something that's a RAR. I am not going to accept a RAR. I'm only going to accept a zip folder. So make sure that you do a zip folder. I don't care what you name this folder. It doesn't matter. If you double click on it, you'll see it has all the files. It should not have the PyCache. It should not have the .id. It should not have the VNV. It should just have the Python files. That's why I'm doing it inside of here. And then you upload that zip folder to OmniVox, and that is how you complete and submit the assignment, and hopefully you've learned something along the way.